Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
I always say that this is my favorite time of the year, and it is. I do love it because of the transfer stuff and the rankings. And then I forget how much work we actually have to do for it. And then it's like, like that one meme of like the child, the parent playing with their child, and then over there's another child like almost drowning. That's what I feel like we're going through right now.
I know. I was trying to explain this to someone that it's the off season, but we're really just as busy as normal. And they're
Yeah,
like, "How is that even possible?" And I was like, I don't know, but we have so many rankings, so many things, so many transfer stuff. Like it just, and honestly, like it's mid-July. We're gonna be like seeing cross country races in like 6 weeks, which
yeah.
is terrifying because like it seems like we have just begun the off season.
Yeah. It's gonna be exciting, but you and I are both actually like in a rush today. We're gonna try to keep this under an hour. But we've got a handful of exciting things. We're gonna go over the hardest names to rank, give you guys an insight into our XC top 50 rankings. Some of these names maybe we ranked, some of them we maybe didn't.
Yep.
You'll find out. Well, you'll find out when the rankings get released. And then also we're gonna get Ben's reaction. I already did a podcast on this, but we're gonna get Ben's reaction on the coaches. Before we do that, thank you. Everyone's doing ratings and reviews. We really appreciate that. Apple +2 there, Spotify +2 there. We got two questions. We got two like written notes on there. One of them saying what what quote unquote bad teams from last XC season have the best chance to be the most improved this fall. Ben, I'm going to rephrase that to because I think it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
It's all relative on conference region. I would say what teams do you think are going to be the most improved to be nationally competitive this year?
Well, this kind of ties into one of the things we'll be talking about next, but the Texas women seem to be a top candidate
Okay.
for the team that could make some significant strides. And then this is a little bit of a cop out in terms of the question that you just answered, but I'm feeling pretty good about my Belmont men's team coming in this year.
Okay.
Brought some transfers in. I mean, Nationals would be a long shot, but I think they're going to be very competitive in Missouri Valley this year. Brought in Carter Cheeseman, brought in a few other guys, have a good existing group of guys, but they needed some firepower up front. I think some of those transfers might do it. So I'm excited to watch them this season.
Yeah, I think the easy answers off the top are like UCLA
Yeah.
and Florida. And again, these weren't quote unquote bad teams. That's why I'm rephrasing the question. But it's kind of like they were never going to be nationally competitive until they made these moves.
Yeah.
UCLA still has some work to do. So yeah, and we'll go into all of this in like our team rankings and we'll discuss and all that. Second question though, love the pod. This is an interesting. The Oregon duo, Connor Burns and Simeon Birnbaum versus Leo and Lex Young. How do you guys see the comparison? And who are you taking? Like, let's say, like, just in terms of straight value, which of those
um,
pairings are you taking?
Straight value, I think I'll go with the Oregon guys. I think they're a
Yep.
little bit more dynamic. When it comes to this fall, though, it'll be interesting to see how much both like all four of these guys are in their teams lineups. Like I think they all will probably get opportunities to do so, but it'll be interesting to see if they stick by the end of the year.
I would agree. For me, like if you're forcing me to choose, I'd say I'll take Burns and Beerbaum just because they gained so much momentum, and not that the Youngs didn't. I mean, what Lex ran the new 5K high school record American, which Burns initially had earlier that same
Yeah,
season. I think it depends. Like if you're looking at cross country, I think I'll take the Youngs. If you're looking at
yeah,
track, I think I'll
agreed.
take the Oregon guys, and I think that's kind of a fair assessment. So. Ben, before we get into the rest of our rankings, also everyone, please continue to leave ratings and reviews. Thank you. But before we get into the hardest names to rank, Thomas to Virginia Tech, Haveman to Texas. Thoughts on the rehiring, I guess, of
Yeah.
Thomas in what we believe to be like a director in waiting role?
Yeah, I listened to the podcast that you put out, and I think this is such a huge win for Virginia Tech to be able to get him without giving him the explicit director role right now. I think is huge because I thought that was going to be one of the bigger holdups to him coming back, as he's gone to an Oregon program while he wasn't a director there. It seemed like whatever his next step was going to be that director role. And for them to be able to split the difference in a way of being like, hey, just come back as head coach, and then and hopefully in a little bit we'll be ready to give you that director role. Huge win. Obviously, we know what he can do there. We don't need to Photoshop a Virginia Tech hat on him. Like we've
It was
seen,
nice.
yeah, we've seen the results that he can give this team. And I just think it's a huge win for them to be able to bring back that caliber of a coach. And I'm sure there were a lot of other programs that were in the mix. And I think for Virginia Tech to be able to, like I said, split that difference in terms of the title that he will have in Landham is a huge win.
Yeah, and I would agree. I won't repeat. Everyone, if they want to hear my thoughts, can go to the last bonus episode we had on Friday. Let's call it Friday. Haveman. This one surprised me. I don't know how much of this portion you listened to the podcast,
I
but
did.
yeah, I love this move, and I'm so excited and fascinated to see what happens here.
It just came out of left field. Like I just this was quite a surprise for me. Trading in different shades of orange, but I think a great pickup for Texas. I think it makes a lot of sense for Haveman as Texas moves to the SEC. They're looking to like it just feels like a move up in terms of prestige and recruiting power that she's going to have moving forward. And for Texas, like you're getting a coach that is proven to be able to turn around a program, develop top athletes like a Jonathan Davis, like Olivia Howe, and bring them to the absolute peak of the NCAA, at least on the track, and then also have cross country teams that are going to be nationally relevant and have the potential of being top 5, top 10 teams in the future if you give her the budget and everything goes well. And so, I mean, as far as picking someone to fill this role, there aren't a whole lot of names that they realistically could have gotten that would have been better than Haveman.
Completely agree. That last thing you just said I think is the biggest portion of this. It's like I don't know if they could have done better than this hire. I mean, realistically, looking out there, I don't know if they could have. I'm a huge Haveman fan. I've been very clear about that. But nice analysis, nice job. But let's get into it. Hardest names to rank. I've been on the phone for hours, literally hours, with Ben, with Mara. We've had some feedback from the rest of the team. We've been making tweaks. We've been doing votes on who gets certain spots. Ben, let's start with the men. Who was your hardest name to rank, or one of your hardest names to rank?
All right, let's start with someone who we had a fight about last year. Wasn't as contentious this year. I think we were more on the same page this year than maybe others. And that, of course, is Colin Sahlman.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a tough one because I mean you almost have to compare him in a lot of ways to like this incoming freshman class, and obviously incoming freshmen are always very difficult to rank because we just haven't seen them on the NCAA stage. And for Sahlman, while we did get to see him, it was not a great fall season for him, but then it was a very good spring. So to kind of put those two together, you're not exactly sure where that's going to land him when it comes this fall. I think we both assume that he has the talent and will eventually be an All-American. If it's not this year, then in the next 2 years. But I just struggled to figure out what the appropriate place to put someone who has his cross-country resume from last year, but also has his high school resume and the spring resume to his resume as well. It's just a lot of contradictions in there.
I completely agree. Because it's a lot of it is like when I say we do these rankings, the thing I always tell everyone here at TSR is I say you have to justify it.
Yeah.
You have to have a justifiable reason. You have to make an argument that is at least as good as mine or my counterpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that, then we can put anyone anywhere, right? But with Sahlman, it's like it's like you're caught between two worlds, and you want to project, right? You want to talk about upside, and you want to give someone who's clearly probably more talented than at least 20 of the names that are actually in the rankings, right? And maybe Sahlman is. But you look at that and it's like, well, what's fair? And I think that's the trickiest part with him. I don't think there's a good answer as to where we would put him. Um, I like that name. I mean, that was a pretty easy name. But
Yeah.
my other name, who I thought we were struggling a little bit with. Let me find him right here. I see, like we were in agreement, but I don't think we feel good about it, and I think that's going to be the consensus here. Kenneth Rooks,
Yeah.
and like the guy runs 8:16, U.S. champ after falling. Stone says he thinks he can be an 8:10 steeplechaser. Are we confident he's even coming back this fall? Like, are we really sure? Are you sure he's not going to turn pro? But he didn't even make their cross country national meet lineup last year. And he's always been good, but he's never been, like I'm one of the
Yeah.
guys here. And it hasn't really translated outside of the steeplechase yet. I have no clue. I have zero clue where to put him because it's never a perfect science going from steeple to XC. Some guys just are completely different animals, and kind of looks like historically that's Rooks.
And you mentioned that he didn't make the BYU team for nationals. That team was so deep and
It
so
was
loaded. And then I mean they still bring back a lot, and you're looking like even if he's running well, he could be their fifth guy, like or sixth guy, and that's just kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, it's always hard to translate or to see how the top steeplechasers translate their performances from the spring to the fall. I think Duncan Hamilton, we were maybe a little higher on coming into last fall, and he didn't quite have maybe the season that we were hoping for. And so you don't want to jump the gun with someone like Rooks, but Rooks is like arguably the best steeplechaser we've seen since Henry Rono.
Yeah, I was
Probably,
gonna say probably Rono. I
yeah.
mean, I can't
And
imagine.
so like it is hard for me to believe that if he's running at that type of fitness, that he wouldn't be a top 50 name pretty easily. But we just haven't seen it, and that's kind of the hold up. And I mean, we've had that conversation with a lot of other guys and women about like we've seen this big jump on the track, but we haven't seen the production on the grass, and we don't know exactly if that's going to translate 100%, 50%, 150%. You
Right.
never know.
I'm going to move us to the women. Who was your hardest name to rank, or at least you? I mean, so you didn't directly work with the women's rankings, but
Right.
obviously you're plenty familiar.
Hmm.
Who was the name that you were like, okay, this is a tricky name to rank in general?
Um, let's go with Natalie Cook.
Oh, that was mine.
So you're talking about someone who, I mean, has the talent and top end like of a potential of a top 5 runner. But you also have someone who you're not 100% sure is going to make it to the national meet, or not really sure how many races you're going to get out of her this fall.
Well, if she races, she's probably getting to the national meet.
Well, I mean that in terms of injury
Right.
concerns.
Right.
Yeah, if she runs, yeah, she'll be there, no doubt. But her availability is a huge question mark. I always hated the quote, "The greatest ability is availability," because no, the greatest ability is being good. I'm available right now. That's not helping any team right now. But it is a huge question mark with Cook. Like, and that is what makes her someone that I think you could realistically rank her like in a 15 person range, and you would have a decent argument for it. At the end of the day, I think the talent is so compelling that we felt like we had to still put her fairly high. But I don't think there was a right answer for someone like her.
No, and that's the thing. Like Mara and I are looking at that, and we stared at the name for like 10 minutes until it's kind of like playing a game of chicken. It's like, well, what do you want to do? No, what do you want to do? And we had no idea. We just didn't know. And it'd be different if Cook had actually put together a full indoor track season
Yep.
and not completely floundered at the NCAA indoor championships, right? Even if she didn't run outdoors, right? At least you give us more data to work with. There's just nothing. There's nothing substantial or significant since last December, and that's the toughest part. And yet, it's so rare that someone's this talented to the point where
Hmm.
their talent still forces them to have what I would believe, given the context, a pretty decent ranking.
Absolutely.
Um, so I struggle. It's not the right spot for her, but it's the correct spot based on the information we know. I'm gonna go. I don't think you're gonna. I don't know if you'll have guessed this about me. I'm gonna go Amy Bunnage. I don't know if I'm saying that name right. Stanford. She's incoming freshman, and I know you're like, well, Garrett, what could be so difficult about her? Well, she's from Australia. She's 18 years old, and she has run 4:14 for 1,500 meters, 8:51 for 3,000
Oh my
meters,
gosh.
and 15:21 for 5,000 meters. This is Natalie Cook plus a level from last year. It's hard. Like, I know Natalie Cook was amazing. I know she was. That doesn't always happen. That's rare. That's really rare. It's rare to have an impact, and then it's rarer to be at that level.
Yep.
I don't know what her or Bunnage's cross-country resume is like. I haven't been able to look too deeply into that. I think she's still one of the names that's kind of like a little bit in flux between a couple names. But regardless, you look at those times, and I'm just like, I have no idea. Yeah, she was like World Athletics Cross-Country Championships. Where did she place? She doesn't say she placed. So yeah, you can understand. It's just a rookie overseas superstar. How good though should we rank her?
I saw her name on the rankings. I was like, I don't recognize that name. And then I was like, oh, she's an incoming freshman. And then I was like, oh, that's an interesting spot to put an incoming freshman. And I mean, you read that resume, and again, I think, like we said with Cook, there's a huge range. I think that would have been appropriate to rank her, because I am notoriously conservative in terms of when it comes to incoming freshmen, a little less so on the women's side. I think on the women's side, that being 6K, a little less of a jump in distance, especially from the high school level. I think that there's more potential for women to go from the high school to collegiate level and exceed right away rather than the men. But that resume is, you're talking about like a Parker Volby resume right there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we're not ranking her next to Parker Volby, but like that's where it's really hard to figure out what the right spot for someone who, on paper, if you did a side-by-side comparison with Volby, you wouldn't be sure exactly which one was Volby. And
that's a good point.
So like, how do you figure out the intangibles of moving to a new country, running in a new competition, and how that your talent is going to translate?
Going to school at Stanford.
Know. Yeah, exactly. I have no idea how we figure that out.
I still don't feel comfortable about like where she's at. Like, it might be like a last minute thing. It's like, hey, maybe put her up, maybe put her down. Like, I don't really know. Maybe she'll probably end up where she's currently ranked, but it's still a name that, like, as we write them, I might be like, hey guys, can we just tweak this? And so we'll see. Men, who's your next men's runner that you weren't sure
All
about?
right, so I'm not going to tell you a name, and I'm going to guess you're going to be able to figure out.
Did you listen back to that other podcast from last year?
I did not, but I'm pretty sure I remember doing.
And then we did this exact same thing.
Yeah. All
and
right.
You were really good.
So I'm going to read off this resume, and I'm gonna hide maybe some moments to make it obviously not perfect. We're talking about a NCAA champion, someone who finished 42nd in the 10K, was 15th.
42nd in the 10K?
In the cross country in the fall last year. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
15th in cross country at their
Luke Hauser.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's like, when you read those things off, you're like, clear, like top 40, maybe clear top 30 guy, like a guy who was nearly an All-American in the grass last year, was obviously went up a level this season during the indoor season and the outdoor season. Won the mile title this indoor year, but his rest of his cross country resume is just not spectacular. 73rd at Nuttycombe, 26th at Cowboy Jamboree. There isn't a whole, like, he was 166th at Nationals in 2021. It's really hard to confidently say that race at Nationals last year wasn't the outlier and we should be ranking him a little further back. But at the same time, he clearly improved. So maybe that's just the direction he's headed.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't love his spot. I want
I'm
him back
pushing
a
for him
little
a
bit.
little more. Yeah,
I know,
I
I
know,
know.
I'm pushing for him, but
Is
because I think
Washington paying you? Is Washington paying you?
hey, now that Brian Fay's gone and just ran 1301, I got to find
Yeah,
somebody else,
yeah,
right?
fair.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I mean the highest of the highs that he's accomplished put him in a very top tier of names. But the consistency leaves a lot to be desired.
And I can respect that. I don't love his spot. I want him back 2 or 3 spots. And just and you fought me on it so hard after I conceded on a couple of points. I was so upset. It's one of those things where I just look at the number next to his name. I'm like,
Seems high. Yeah.
seems to, yeah, touch high, not super high, just slightly high.
We're gonna have, I think, this similar argument with him for another thing that we're doing probably in the future.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh, yeah, I've got to, yeah, I've noticed that. Anyways, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and I'm gonna put two guys together here,
Okay.
Lex and
Yeah.
Leo Young.
Okay.
I mean, not gonna lie, Colin Sahlman last year fought hard for him. I may have yelled at Ben. I definitely yelled at Ben. I yelled at Ben to put him top 30, and it didn't work out. It just didn't work out. He was absolutely not a top 50 guy. Granted, got a lot better.
Yeah.
I believe that at least Lex Young's probably better over the longer distances, especially after running 13:34 for 5,000 meters. I think that is a difference maker there. But Leo's really not that far off.
Mm-hmm.
He's fairly equivalent. How much further do you leave one guy from the other? Do you only rank one? Do you rank both? How high do you rank them? Are we going to be too cautious after what happened to Colin Sahlman?
Yeah.
Freshmen are impossible, and this is just like the toughest group because the high school scene has elevated to a point where I was like, there's 6 guys here, so I could like realistically argue for, and you have to start comparing them. It's like, well, how much better are Lex and Leo Young? In what respect? And what are they trying to do this season? So that was my issue, and I still don't perfectly love where they are or are not, but we'll see.
I think we landed in a good spot, and I actually think that their transition to Stanford is going to be a little easier in terms of they're not going to 7,000 feet, just training with I mean, they're training with great athletes. Don't get me wrong at Stanford, but like just some aerobic powerhouses that Sahlman probably got thrown into the mix with right away at a very high altitude. That is something that we haven't really seen anybody like come in, pick that up, and just succeed right away. I mean, Nico Young, we saw him have that great performance his freshman year in cross country, but that was in the winter season. He had a full semester to kind of acclimate, and I think Nico, I don't know how you feel about him, but I think he's probably, in terms of his cross country ability and just being a grinder, a step ahead of maybe his brothers and Sahlman in that respect. And so I think it's understandable for like Sahlman to have not quite hit the ground running. I do think that the young brothers are going to be contributors at Stanford. I asked Kai Robinson about this in our Lane 9 episode, and he didn't want to put too much pressure on them, but I think was very hopeful, it seemed, that they were going to be able to come in and be in that top 7 and be contributors. And I think that's about right. I don't think they're going to be top 4 scorers, but I think they could be guys that are in that 5-6 range, providing good depth. I don't know how consistent they're going to be. They're going to be freshmen, so they're probably going to be up and down, but I think at least one of them is going to come through and score for them at nationals. I don't know if that means an All-American spot, but I think it'll be close.
Completely fair. Women, who's your second woman that you were unsure of?
We've talked about her a lot throughout her career, although a lot less in the last year. She's, I believe, has been, let's see, how many times has she wasn't an All-American last year in the grass. She did not run well then. Was nearly an All-American 2 years ago, and
Oh,
seems to be just fighting her way back. She qualified for nationals in the 10K this past spring, a
all
little
right.
bit
Stop.
surprisingly.
Stop. I'm gonna figure this out. Is it Molly Bourne?
Yes, that was
Oh my
excellent.
gosh, let's
I didn't think you had a
go!
prayer at getting that one.
Oh,
That
I
was
am
amazing.
so good at my job. Holy crap. That was awesome. I can't believe I got that.
Yeah, I am stunned. I didn't think you had a prayer at that one. But yeah, we
That's
we
awesome.
I think we've both been big fans of Molly Bourne throughout her
Yeah.
career. She didn't, like I said, didn't have the greatest of years. Leading up to this, she was 73rd at NCAA's in 2021, in the fall of 2021, 54th at NCAA's in the winter nationals for cross country, but was 16th all the way back in 2019. So she clearly has the potential, but we just haven't seen it as of recently. But this spring gave us a lot of cause for hope. And it seems like she's rounding back into fitness. Maybe not obviously at the top level that she's been at, but she's getting close again. And I just don't know what to do with her, because I think there's a very real possibility she becomes this great X factor for an Oklahoma State team that obviously has lost a little bit, but is bringing in some good names as well. I think she could be someone we're looking at the end of the season being like, oh, wow, she finished 29th at nationals. That was
Yeah.
huge performance. And I mean, you could go the other way of being like, she barely was on in their top 7 and finished 150th. Like, I think there's a very real possibility of either of those, but all the signs seem to be trending in a positive direction. I just don't know how positive that she'll be this year.
Um, you said that perfectly. I don't really know if I really have much more to say about that. I mean, that's kind of the. I've said this multiple times, is that I don't believe talent just disappears.
Agreed.
And I think Stollerper is a really good example of
Mm-hmm.
that. Extended time off, but then ran that 15:37 one season. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, so good. Talent doesn't disappear. And when you see what she did last spring, and she like caught some momentum, caught some fire at the end, and you know what she's done in the past, you begin to be like, So I think that's the really difficult part of this. But I agree with a lot that you said. I don't want to be too redundant.
Mm-hmm.
My name, I'm trying to figure out. I'll quiz you.
Oh gosh, here we go.
I'll quiz you here. Was not in our rankings last year.
Okay.
International athlete. Has some absurd times, listed times. Joining a program that has been very competitive in the long distances recently. I'm trying to figure out what else I can say to not give this away.
Amelia Mazadowny?
No. You get one more
Am I
guess.
like am I like in the right, is that like the right thoughts or no?
I mean, you're not quite. I mean, like,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say probably that's probably not where you want to look.
Can you give me one more?
Where's red?
Where's red? Like, what was wearing red or is now wearing red?
Is now wearing red.
Oh, I'm gonna be upset about this. Flamina Askell? No, that's that red. She wasn't red. I don't know. Give it to me.
Doris Cherop of Alabama.
Oh, okay. Duh.
So
Yeah.
you had one former Alabama runner.
Yeah.
Doris
Yeah.
Cherop. 935 steeplechaser. Apparently that came at altitude. I don't know that for a fact. towards that thrown around somewhere. But if
Yeah.
that's true, that gets really interesting. She also has a 1440 5K road race PR. You take that for what you will.
Yep.
It's a fast course in a loaded field. The roads, right? It's a little different. Um, I don't know. Like how on earth do you rank that? I mean, there's really not a ton to look at. The times that we do have though are so like crazy elite. She has multiple like really nice steeple marks, but I don't know. Like I just have no idea. And like I'm, does that mean she's going to be top 40 or outside the top 40? Could she be as good as like top 10? I really don't know. I have no good idea of like where we're going to put her or where we ultimately decided.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the kind of like incoming freshman scenario where it's like even if you have these incredible times, it you just don't know how the adjustment's going to be. You don't know what the like adjustment in terms of lifestyle, and then the adjustment in terms of just new race situations is going to be like. I truthfully, when I was going through the rankings, I missed her, but I could like when I was looking through, I was like, I could look in the top 10 and be like, I don't think that's that crazy. And then I was like, I could look towards like the bottom 50, and I was like, I don't think that would be crazy either. I have no idea how you guys landed where you did. I think this would have been
I
nearly
don't think
horrible.
we did either. I don't think we know how we landed there either. And that's just the tricky part of this. So um, I think we're on our last men's
Yep.
name. Do we think? Yeah. Well, let's do one more set of men, one more set of women. If we have time, we'll maybe add on. Um, who's your other men's name?
When a bounce back and forth between a few guys. And if I'm curious
Well,
after
let's
you
let's say
go,
okay. Go ahead.
after you go, we like quickly hit on a few others. Haftu Night. So
Yep.
27th last year at Nationals, was fun. It was good, but not 27th at Nationals. I feel like throughout the regular season, 8th at Big 12s, 8th at Panorama, 24th at Cowboy Jamboree. I think that looks like someone who's probably going to be an All-American, but not a lock by any means. Had a solid indoor season. Comes out, runs 13:32 outdoors. Doesn't have a great regional or Big 12 championships this spring. I think we have him in the right range. I just don't know where within that range he should land, because I think there's a compelling argument for some guys who maybe have a little bit more consistency, but he's proven that he has a top end ceiling that is as good as almost anyone, and that's what makes him super compelling in my mind.
Yeah. The um, like you look at it, you're like, man, is that the right spot for him? And I could maybe like want to push him down a little lower, but then you look at the names beneath him. I'm like, are we really sure that they're better than Knight?
Yeah.
And I don't think we feel that much more convinced about it. And that's why it's like, that's a little interesting. And so you're caught into like this like I'm taking like what I already know versus what I know about everyone
Yeah.
else, and it's a clash between two mentalities, I guess. I don't know if any of that made sense, but it did in my head. Um,
Let's hear your name.
Haftu Strintzos.
The other half too.
The other half too. I mean, incredible in 2021, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wins galore. But top 10, I believe, at nationals that year, maybe 10th or something like that. Outstanding. He was awesome, and he
Mm-hmm.
deserved whatever the high ranking was he had going to the preseason. But then, you look at what actually happened. I don't actually have his Peever's profile pulled up right now, but you look at like what he did last fall, and it's like, okay, he was 47th at Mainline. I'm sorry, 47th at Nuttycombe. He was second at Big East, 15th Mid Atlantic, 185th at Nationals. And you go through the outdoor track season. He goes, okay, 13:45 PR, nice. Qualifies for Nationals in 10K, finishes 19th. I don't know what version of him we're going to get. And I think it would be a little silly just to like, well, just forget about 2021. It's only recent. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's night and day. I mean, we're talking about like an elite superstar 2021, and then we're talking about like a guy who's, I mean, not even sniffing our honorable mentions.
Yeah.
So I have no idea.
Yeah, I remember last fall we were so surprised how well Villanova was doing despite
Mm-hmm.
Strintzos really not being that low stick we expected him to be. And we kind of were like, oh well, if he can finally round back into form, they're gonna be really, really good because you have guys like Liam Murphy and other guys who are really coming on strong and leading this program well. And we just never saw that 2021 version. It seemed like things were trending in the right direction. And then Nationals just kind of reverted back to what we saw at the beginning of the year. So yeah, I mean, he was a very hard name to rank because of that. The other, do we want to go over a few other names real quickly
Let's
before we win? Save it for later.
let's go to the women because I
Okay.
think we're going to have a little bit more time.
Yeah.
We can maybe try to do another pair of names after we try the
Sure.
women. Let's try that.
All right. On the women's side, so Siona Chisholm. Maybe not a huge maybe not someone that maybe you felt like you guys struggled with, but I was perplexed on where to put her
Mm-hmm.
because you look at the beginning of her year. She was a true freshman last year, I believe. Not a great start to the season. 86 at Joe Piani,
I think she was a
81st.
sophomore, by the way.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think but these were her first performances, I think, last year.
Yeah, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I gotcha. So 86th at Joe Piani, 81st at Nuttycombe. And then one of the big reasons why Notre Dame almost upset NC State at ACCs was she finished 7th
Mm-hmm.
and then followed that up with 4th at Great Lakes and then was a very respectable 81st at NCAAs. She comes back, has a very decent indoor season, and then outdoors finishes 10th at NCAAs in the 5K. So she's young, she's developing. She was obviously trending in a great direction at the end of the fall. Finished the spring on a high. I think if the rankings were up with me, I think I might have put her way too high, but I kind of understand maybe where you guys landed, but I still would push for her to be a little higher because I think there's upside. She's shown flashes of really, really good ability, and she just seems to be getting better season after season.
You want her to be the Isaiah Story of the women's rankings.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair comparison. Yeah, I get it. Like I like her too. I don't think I like her as much as maybe you are. You know, as high as you are on her. But I get it. Like I get it because the promise was like already there in the fall, and
Mm-hmm.
then to validate it in such a big way with that 5K, um, it was impressive. And I think Notre Dame has to like be really banking on what she's going to bring to the table because if she can be that low stick next to Markovic, if Vanderlyn can get there, then you're looking at a podium team,
Mm-hmm.
probably like third, fourth place maybe. Um, it'll be tight this year again, but
Yeah.
I think Chisholm's kind of like that major X factor. Can she be the one to really reach that next level? And if she can, um, Notre Dame's going to be scary, more scary than they already are.
Yep.
Um, my individual who I struggled with here, Yasmin Marghini of Boise State here. Last fall, 46 at Joe Piani. Not for these rankings, that's not great. Then she was 44th at Nuttycombe, which is better, not perfect, but better. Goes to Mountain West, gets second against a slew of New Mexico women, 10th at West Regional Championships, and then 35th at the cross country national meet. Track times are fine, not a ton there. I mean, it's not a bad resume, but up until the national meet, it's not necessarily a great resume
Mm-hmm.
from a top 50 perspective either. And that's like okay, she's 35th at nationals, but like I remember this one year where like Christian Allen got like
Yeah.
14th at the national meet. But you looked at all that he did prior to that, he was not even in the top 100.
Yeah.
Like it was insane. So this is like the light version of that, where
Mhm.
instead of, you know, uh, Allen placing 14th, it's Marghini placing 35th, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you reward that, or how much you reward it, or how much we put into the regular season, and what else she did elsewhere. And Boise State has a history of producing like some really solid individuals. I don't know if we made the right decision, but I don't know if it's the right spot for her. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a good time to kind of point out that in our rubric for like the rankings, we're not just looking obviously at an NCAA performance. Obviously, that's huge, but that's one performance, and that just does not give you a big enough sample size to be able to look at someone's overall resume. And that's why we look at like the other big races, especially like a Nutty Combe or a Prenat or a Joe Piani, like these other big races where you kind of get a sense of someone's true consistency and maybe a truer sense of their ability overall. And when you have someone like Marghini, you just have to throw your hands up because these performances are telling you two different things, and you kind of have to decide: do you just kind of split the difference? Do you pick one over the other? And for Marghini, obviously, I think for her track season to not really tell a story and a huge story in either direction makes it all that more difficult. So I mean I would tend to land maybe a hair higher, but I don't think you guys. I think where you guys landed, I think is about right.
Yeah, and I think so too. I'm just not. As you can tell, I have no conviction in any of these rankings. I'm sure people are gonna be thrilled about that. Let's move off. Let's go like a few other names that are just riffed off for the men's side. I can tell you like right now that
Sure.
Brody Hasty and Santiago Prosser are
Yeah.
a nightmare to rank. They aren't. They were fine. Relative to top 50 rankings, they weren't that amazing during the regular season, and then they were unbelievably phenomenal at the national meet. I don't know how you reward that. It's the same thing that we just went over with Christian Allen, again to varying extents there. But those were the two guys that I also wanted to riff off of. I don't know if you had any other names there.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And Hasty's been doing that almost every single year of his
Yeah,
career.
that's
It's
true.
it's, it's incredible is the consistency of which he is not good throughout the regular season and then spectacular at NCAA's. It's at this point you just have to bank on it. He's proven that he can do it. And so yeah, I like both those. Toby Gillen, literally
Yep.
have no idea.
Yep.
Like great breakout track season. Who knows what it's going to be like on the grass? He moving to Ole Miss, changing programs, so much anything could happen with him.
Same thing with Chandler Gibbons, Kansas.
Yes, absolutely. And then Victor Kipiego obviously broke out in a huge way in the steeplechase this year. Um, was okay. Last outdoor or last cross country season, I think he was like around 100th NCAA's last year. Um, I don't know. Like clearly he's gotten better, but is he 100th to 40th better? Is he 100th to 70th better? Like who knows? So yeah, I think there's another good list of names on the men's side.
Alex Phillip. I'm also gonna throw that in there.
Yeah,
Maybe the greatest D3 distance runner ever. Maybe. I don't know. I don't. I'd have to like really sit down and look at that history.
yeah,
But really great times. But like, it's a different beast. It's a different beast
mhm.
in D1, and he's definitely capable of. I mean, he's run great against the guys on the track, but cross country, different. You just don't know. You just don't know. It's a completely different animal. So I think we got him. I think at a fair spot. I think that's a pretty
I think
decent
so.
spot. On the women's side, who are some of the names that you were back and forth on?
Greta Kiernan-Skate,
Yep.
again, steeplechase breakout year, obviously way better. Wasn't great last fall. Uh, she could be anywhere. Olivia Howe, like who is the real Olivia Howe on the grass from last year? Was it the Olivia Howe from the beginning of the season or the one at NCAA's? Like I don't. She showed that she was clearly capable of being an All American throughout like the first 3 quarters of the year, and then just didn't have a great NCAA race. Was fantastic, obviously in indoor and outdoor. I don't know which how or who we can expect. I don't know where she's going to be next year. I think she's almost impossible to rank.
Margot Appleton as well.
Mm,
Another one of those names. Big breakout.
yeah,
Good. Like still good on the grass last year, but not
yeah,
anywhere close to where her track performance is indicated. Um, oh my gosh, who was the other name that I was just looking at? Oh, this is going to bother me. Oh, Kelsey Harrington.
Yeah.
Huge, another thing, huge breakout race at nationals. Good regular season, good, but not that good. And so that's another name. I mean, I'm just kind of going down the list. I mean, there's a handful of women. You could argue the freshmen. I actually feel pretty good about the freshmen here. Mia
Yeah.
Cochran, what is she like in terms of year two? Um, Brianna Weidler, excuse me, of UC Davis. I mean, the list is pretty extensive in terms of ways you could argue with a handful of these women. Tori Herman, another name kind of like that, given what she did in 2021. So, um, yeah, it was a long phone calls with both you and Mara. Um, but I think we just solved all the world's problems. I'm still on the high of guessing Molly Bourne. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
still,
As you
I
should be.
that's pretty great. I can't believe I got that one. That's all I have on my end. What else have you got?
That's it. I mean, yeah, I really enjoyed going through the rankings with you. It's always an exciting time, a little stressful because we
Yeah,
we we care. So I think Zach Lowe, who's a basketball podcaster and writer, always talks with like such great anxiety about his like MVP votes and stuff.
yeah,
And he's like he cares and he wants to get it right. And I feel like we're like thinking about this, but we're thinking about that for like 50 plus names and being
yeah,
like, we really care where each of these people land, and like having a good explanation and being able to look at that person and be like, no, this is why, and we feel like it's fair. So uh as you can tell, we are of many minds for a lot of these people, but I think ultimately we've come to a good spot.
yeah. I'll say it. I don't think you're going to find any other site that does rankings as thoughtfully as we do. I'll just
Absolutely
say it.
not.
Explanations, we got them. Detail by detail, as extensive as we do, we got them. We care, and we are putting in the time. Which is why you should go subscribe to the Stroud Report. You're going to get some really awesome content. D2, D3 rankings probably going to come next week if this is released on a Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. But that's it. That's all I got. Ratings, reviews, go subscribe on YouTube. But Ben, that's all I got.
All right, well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.